Have you ever wondered what a single hug could change? I don't need money, I just need a hug, like the one your son gave me. The words of the 8-year-old boy echoed through the luxurious lobby of the shopping mall, causing several people to stop and watch the unusual scene. Marcus Wellington, CEO of Wellington Industries and one of the richest men in the country, had just left the toy store carrying expensive bags for his son Tyler, who was the same age. The black boy was sitting on the floor near the fountain alone, watching families pass by with a look that mixed curiosity and melancholy. "I'm sorry, kid, but I don't have time for this," Marcus replied curtly, adjusting his Hermes tie as he tried to avoid the boy. His voice carried the tone of superiority that people like him used when they wanted to make it clear that they considered certain conversations a waste of time. The boy stood up slowly, his worn sneakers contrasting starkly with Marcus' Italian shoes. "It's not about time, sir. It's about love. I saw you hugging your son in there, and I thought maybe you could give me one, too." Marcus stopped abruptly, not because of the tenderness of the request, but because of his growing irritation. "Where are your parents? Children shouldn't be left alone around here. Someone should call security." "My mom works cleaning on the 3rd floor," the boy replied without shame in his voice. "She said when she was done, she'd come down and get me. In the meantime, I'm here watching the happy people." The answer made Marcus frown. "A maid? Of course. Look, kid. I don't know what kind of trick this is, but I'm not obligated to." "It's not a trick," the boy interrupted him gently. "It's just that I've never had a hug from a father. And you seem really good at it." For a moment, something flashed across Marcus's face. Perhaps a distant memory of his own childhood when hugs were also rare in his home. But the feeling lasted only seconds before it was replaced by renewed irritation. "Listen here, kid." Marcus crouched down to the boy's height, his voice low but sharp. "The world owes you nothing. The sooner you learn that, the better. Now get out of my way." The little boy didn't move. Instead, his eyes locked onto Marcus with an intensity surprising for someone so young. "You're right," he said calmly. "The world owes me nothing, but I don't owe it anything either." Marcus stood up, taken aback by the response. There was something in the boy's voice, a firmness that didn't match his age, that bothered him more than he cared to admit. "Dad, why are you talking to him?" Tyler appeared at his father's side, following his gaze toward the black boy. "He's not one of us." Marcus smiled approvingly. "Exactly, son. Some people just don't belong in our circles." He placed a protective hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Let's get out of here before this becomes a problem." As father and son walked away, the little boy remained standing, watching them disappear between the expensive stores. His small hands slowly closed into fists, but his face remained eerily calm. A woman in a cleaning uniform hurried over. "Daniel, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I took longer than I expected." She noticed her son's expression. "Did something happen?" Daniel looked at his mother, then in the direction where Marcus had disappeared. "Yes, something happened, Mom. I learned a very important lesson today." "What lesson, son?" A small but determined smile appeared on Daniel's face. "I learned that some people need to be taught about humanity, and maybe I'm just the right person to teach them." His mother frowned, not fully understanding. But something in her son's tone of voice made her realize that this encounter had planted a seed that would grow in unimaginable ways. Could this be the start of something extraordinary? 3 days after the encounter at the mall, Daniel was sitting in the public library, leafing through a book about business when he saw the photo. Marcus Wellington was on the cover of Forbes magazine, smiling confidently next to the headline, "The Business Emperor, How Marcus Wellington Built a $2 billion Empire." Daniel ran his fingers over the image, memorizing every detail of the face that had rejected him so coldly. It wasn't anger he felt. It was something deeper, more calculated. It was the birth of a purpose. "That man is very rich, isn't he, son?" asked his mother, Rosa, sitting down next to him after finishing her cleaning shift. Her tired eyes showed the marks of someone who worked 16 hours a day to support her son alone. "Yes, Mom. Very rich." Daniel closed the magazine carefully. But wealth isn't everything, right? Rosa smiled proudly. Even at 8 years old, her son showed a maturity that constantly surprised her. What she didn't know was that Daniel had inherited something much more valuable than money. A photographic memory and an intelligence that his teachers were beginning to notice as exceptional. That same week, while Daniel was studying at the library, Marcus Wellington was giving an interview on local TV about corporate social responsibility. The reporter asked him about programs to help the needy. "Look, it's important to help those who really deserve it," Marcus replied, adjusting his expensive jacket. "But we can't just give handouts to anyone. Some people need to learn that in life everything has a price and nothing is free." The presenter nodded respectfully. "What about education for vulnerable children?" Marcus laughed dismissively. "Education only works when there is a solid family foundation. There's no point in investing in those who don't have the structure to take advantage of the opportunity. It's money down the drain." Across town, Daniel watched the interview on the small television in the library. Every word Marcus said was engraved in his mind as if it were a personal affront. But instead of crying or rebelling, Daniel did something unexpected. He smiled. "Why are you smiling, dear?" asked Mrs. Benedetta, the librarian who had become a kind of adoptive grandmother to the boy. "Because he just gave me all the answers I needed," Daniel replied enigmatically, turning his attention back to the economics books he had piled on the table. The following week, Daniel's school organized a science fair. His project caught everyone's attention, a detailed analysis of economic inequality and educational opportunities. For an 8-year-old boy, the work demonstrated an impressive understanding of complex concepts. "Where did you get this information?" asked the teacher, leafing through the meticulously organized pages. "Research, teacher. I read a lot about entrepreneurs who started out poor and became rich, and also about entrepreneurs who were born rich and stayed rich without doing much for society." The teacher noticed a separate folder with newspaper clippings all about Wellington Industries. "Why are you so interested in this particular company?" Daniel looked her straight in the eye with the same disconcerting serenity he had shown at the mall. "Because one day I'm going to work there, or rather, I'm going to own it." The teacher laughed, thinking it was just a childish dream. But something in Daniel's voice, the way he had organized every piece of information, every chart, every financial figure about the company, made her realize that this was no child's fantasy. It was a plan. Meanwhile, Marcus Wellington continued his privileged life, completely unaware that he had planted a seed of determination in a mind that would prove to be brighter and more dangerous than he could ever imagine. After receiving first place at the science fair, Daniel kept the trophy on a small shelf in the room he shared with his mother. Next to the trophy, he taped a photo cut out of Forbes magazine. It wasn't Marcus in the photo. It was the Wellington Industries building. "One day, Mom," he muttered to himself. "He'll find out that underestimating people can be the biggest mistake of your life." Rosa, who had heard the comment from the kitchen, felt a chill. She couldn't explain why, but she had a feeling that her little boy was planning something much bigger than a child should be capable of planning. What neither of them knew was that that same night, Marcus Wellington would approve an internal policy that would make it even harder for people like Rosa to get promotions at the cleaning company that provided services to Wellington Industries. The circle of cruelty was just beginning to form. Each new humiliation Marcus inflicted on people like Rosa and Daniel only fueled a silent determination that grew like a storm on the horizon, invisible to those who couldn't recognize the signs, but devastating to those who underestimated its destructive force. 8 years had passed since that encounter at the mall, and Daniel Santos, now 16, had become something Marcus Wellington could never have predicted, an academic prodigy with a thirst for justice. During all that time, Marcus remained exactly the same arrogant and prejudiced man. In fact, he had gotten worse. His business policies had become even more exclusionary, and he had developed a habit of giving lectures on meritocracy at elite universities, always emphasizing that some people are simply not cut out for certain positions. Daniel followed Marcus' every move through newspapers, interviews, and social media. It wasn't obsession, it was research. Methodically, he cataloged every prejudiced statement, every discriminatory policy of Wellington Industries. Every time Marcus publicly demonstrated his contempt for people like him and his mother, "Son, are you sure you want to study business?" Rosa asked one evening watching Daniel study surrounded by books on economics, business law, and finance. "You're so brilliant at math and science." "I'm sure, Mom," Daniel replied without looking up from the Wellington Industries financial charts he had printed out at the library. Some battles can only be won when you understand exactly how the system works. What Rosa didn't know was that Daniel had achieved something extraordinary, a full scholarship to study at the same elite university where Marcus Wellington often gave lectures. Even more impressive, he had been accepted at 16, 2 years younger than most freshmen. It was during his second week at the university that Daniel met Professor Harrison Mitchell, a 60-year-old black man who taught business ethics and had been one of the few professors to publicly question Marcus Wellington's lectures. "Are you the kid who sent in that analysis of corporate discrimination?" Professor Mitchell asked after class, looking at Daniel with genuine curiosity. "Yes, sir," Daniel replied, maintaining the respectful posture he always displayed with adults he admired. "In my 40 years in academia, I have rarely seen such an accurate and well-reasoned analysis, especially from someone so young." Professor Mitchell sat down on the edge of the desk. "May I ask what motivated you to choose Wellington Industries specifically as a subject for study?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. "Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting to understand how men like Marcus Wellington operate." Professor Mitchell nodded understandingly. "Personal reasons often produce the best research. How about we work together on a special project?" That was how Daniel gained access to academic resources he could never have imagined. Professor Mitchell not only became his mentor, but also his first strategic ally. Together, they began systematically documenting discriminatory practices not only at Wellington Industries, but throughout Marcus' entire business circle. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his life of privilege, completely unaware that the kid he had looked down on years ago was now studying his every move with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. During this period, Daniel discovered something fascinating in the company's public records. Wellington Industries had received millions in tax incentives and government subsidies over the years, supposedly for social inclusion programs that were never implemented. The money had been diverted to other purposes, but in a technically legal way, a gray area that Marcus exploited masterfully. "This is pure gold," Professor Mitchell murmured as he reviewed Daniel's findings. "But you need to understand that people like Wellington have expensive lawyers and political influence. Any move against him must be calculated with absolute precision." "I know," Daniel replied, meticulously organizing his evidence folders. "That's why I'm not going to attack him head-on. I'm going to use the very system he's been manipulating for decades." That was when Daniel revealed his most ambitious plan to Professor Mitchell. He didn't just want to expose Marcus Wellington. He wanted to replace him. At 16, Daniel had already developed a revolutionary business model that could not only compete with Wellington Industries, but also demonstrate that ethical companies were more profitable in the long run. "Are you serious?" Professor Mitchell asked, impressed by the sophistication of the plan presented by his young protégé. "Completely serious, Marcus Wellington planted a seed of determination in me 8 years ago. Now it's time to show him what kind of tree that seed has grown into." Professor Mitchell smiled. There was something in Daniel's voice, a mixture of serenity and contained power, that reminded him of great leaders he had known throughout his life. "Then let's get to work. But I want you to understand one thing. The path you are choosing will not be easy. People like Wellington don't take being challenged by people like me." Daniel finished the sentence, his smile carrying a confidence that didn't match his 16 years. "Exactly," Professor Daniel replied, organizing his papers with precise movements. "Marcus Wellington made the mistake of teaching me that the world owes me nothing. He just forgot to consider one possibility. What if I decide that I don't owe his world anything either?" That night, as Daniel walked across the university campus, he passed the auditorium where Marcus Wellington would be giving a lecture the following week on leadership and excellence in the corporate world. A small but promising smile appeared on his face. The boy who had once asked for just a hug was about to become the nightmare of the man who had denied him even that small display of humanity. And the most ironic thing was that Marcus Wellington, in his infinite arrogance, had no idea that he had created his own tormentor that day at the mall 8 years ago. What Marcus would soon discover was that underestimating the intelligence and determination of a rejected child had been the biggest strategic mistake of his life. Because Daniel Santos wasn't just preparing to confront him. He was preparing to surpass him in every aspect that Marcus valued most. Success, influence, and above all, the respect that comes with true leadership. Marcus Wellington's lecture on leadership and excellence in the corporate world was packed. The university's main auditorium held 500 people, including influential business leaders, professors, and students. Marcus, now 44, had reached the height of his arrogance. Boasting a net worth of $2.3 billion and a reputation he considered untouchable. Success in the business world, Marcus declared from the pulpit, adjusting the microphone with a theatrical gesture, is not a matter of luck or circumstance. It is a matter of birth, proper education, and above all knowing your place in the social hierarchy. The audience applauded politely. In the third row, Daniel Santos, now 16 and looking much more mature, watched every word with the patience of a predator studying his prey. Professor Mitchell sat next to him, both with discreet briefcases on their laps. Some people are born to lead, Marcus continued, walking across the stage with the confidence of someone who has never questioned his own privilege. Others are born to follow, and the sooner we accept this reality, the more efficient our society becomes. That's when Daniel calmly stood up and asked a question. Marcus, not recognizing him after 8 years, nodded permissively. Mr. Wellington, Daniel began, his clear voice echoing through the auditorium. You just mentioned that some people are born to lead. I'd like to know your opinion on businessmen who use public money to finance their private empires. Marcus frowned, slightly irritated by the impertinence. Young man, government investment in private companies is an established economic practice. Perhaps you should study more economics before. Oh, I have, Daniel interrupted him gently, opening his briefcase. In fact, I have studied Wellington Industries specifically. For example, between 2015 and 2023, your company received $47 million in tax incentives for social inclusion programs that were never implemented. The auditorium fell silent. Marcus felt the first chill down his spine, but he kept his composure. That's confidential information and you clearly have no knowledge of. I have all the documents here, Daniel said calmly, holding up a bulky folder, including internal memos where you specifically order that the funds be redirected to more profitable projects, his exact words. Professor Mitchell stood up and began distributing copies down the aisles. The audience murmured, leafing through papers showing internal correspondence from Wellington Industries, violated government contracts, and falsified reports. Marcus tried to regain control. Listen here, kid. You don't know who you're dealing with. My lawyers. Your lawyers have already been notified, Daniel replied, his voice maintaining a disconcerting calm. As have the Federal Prosecutor's Office, the Internal Revenue Service, and 3 congressional committees. That was when Marcus really looked at Daniel for the first time. Something in those eyes, in that posture, awakened a distant memory. A boy in the mall asking for a hug. Impossible, Marcus muttered, the blood draining from his face. Daniel smiled, the same calm smile he had shown 8 years earlier. Do you remember me, Mr. Wellington? I was that little boy who just wanted a hug. You told me the world owed me nothing. The auditorium was completely silent now. Marcus felt his legs go weak. You were right, Daniel continued, walking slowly toward the stage. The world really didn't know me anything, so I decided I didn't know your world anything either. Daniel stopped in the center of the auditorium and turned to face the audience. For the past 8 years, I have systematically documented all of Wellington Industries' illegal practices. Fraudulent contracts, tax evasion, systematic discrimination in hiring, manipulation of public tenders. Marcus tried to leave at the back of the stage, but 2 men in suits, clearly federal agents, blocked his way. The most interesting part, Daniel said, pulling a tablet out of his briefcase, is the text messages Mr. Wellington sent to his executives last night, trying to destroy evidence after he learned an investigation was beginning. The screens in the auditorium lit up, showing printouts of conversations in which Marcus ordered the destruction of documents and threatened employees who might talk too much. Obstruction of justice, Professor Mitchell announced to the stunned audience. In addition to all the other crimes, Marcus Wellington, the man who had built an empire based on arrogance and privilege, was now at the center of his own public destruction. Cameras from journalists who had been discreetly invited to the event captured every moment of his humiliation. For 8 years, Daniel said, his voice echoing through the auditorium with unshakable moral authority. You built your wealth by trampling on people like me and my mother. Today, those same people you despised are responsible for your downfall. Agents approached Marcus with handcuffs. Before being led away, he looked at Daniel one last time, finally understanding the magnitude of his own arrogance. The little boy who asked for a hug, Marcus whispered, defeated. He grew up, Daniel replied simply. As Marcus Wellington was escorted out of the auditorium amid camera flashes and shouts from reporters, one question hung in the air. Could a single display of humanity denied 8 years ago have planted the seed for the biggest corporate downfall of the decade? And more importantly, what did Daniel Santos plan to do with the empire he had helped bring down? 2 years after Marcus Wellington's spectacular fall, Daniel Santos walked the streets of the same neighborhood where he grew up, but now as CEO of the Santos Foundation, an organization that had become the largest provider of scholarships for low-income youth in the United States. Wellington Industries had been completely restructured after Marcus' arrest for tax fraud, obstruction of justice, and corruption. Ironically, Daniel had acquired the company for a fraction of its market value during a court auction, transforming it into a model of corporate social responsibility that other companies now desperately copied. Mr. Santos, said Amanda Rodriguez, his director of operations, 50 more applications for this week's mentoring program have arrived. That's more than 5,000 young people benefiting in just 2 years. Daniel smiled as he leafed through the candidates' profiles. Each story was a mirror of his own journey. Bright young people who just needed an opportunity to show their potential. Take everyone who meets the basic criteria. And remember, no child will be judged by the color of their skin, their social background, or the type of clothes they wear. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Marcus Wellington was living a very different reality. After serving 18 months in prison, he had lost not only his fortune, but also custody of his son, Tyler. His ex-wife, horrified by the public revelations about her husband's character, had moved to another state with the child. Marcus now worked as a salesman in a small electronics store, earning minimum wage. His former friends in the business world avoided him completely, and his reputation was so destroyed that he couldn't even get basic bank loans. You don't understand, Marcus begged his lawyer on the phone. I need a chance to start over. Just one chance, Marcus. His lawyer replied wearily, you systematically destroyed the lives of hundreds of people over decades. Now you're experiencing a fraction of what they felt. The following week, Daniel was invited to give the keynote speech at the graduation ceremony of the same university where he had confronted Marcus 2 years earlier. The auditorium was packed with graduates, families, and influential figures. Today, I want to tell you a story about an 8-year-old boy, Daniel began, his voice echoing across the same stage where Marcus had been humiliated. This boy had learned that the world owed him nothing. But he also decided that he owed nothing to the cruel world that tried to limit him. The audience was completely silent, captivated by the story that many already knew from the news, but which took on a new dimension when told from the perspective of the protagonist himself. What that arrogant man didn't realize, Daniel continued, was that he was planting a seed of determination in a mind that would prove more powerful than all his money and privilege combined. Professor Mitchell, now the university's dean, watched proudly from his seat in the front row. His former student had become not only a successful businessman, but a symbol of hope for millions of young people facing discrimination. True revenge, Daniel said, his voice carrying the wisdom gained through years of struggle and growth, is not destroying those who hurt you. It is building something so great that it renders irrelevant the cruelty they try to impose on you. In the audience, Rosa Santos cried with pride. His daughter had become a lawyer through one of Daniel's foundation scholarships and now worked defending families in situations similar to the one she and Daniel had faced years ago. After the speech, a journalist approached Daniel. Mr. Santos, Marcus Wellington recently gave an interview asking for a second chance. Do you have any comment? Daniel reflected for a moment. Everyone deserves a second chance. The difference is that some people use it to learn and grow, while others just lament the consequences of their own choices. That night, Daniel visited the orphanage where he now sponsored a music and arts program. Seeing an 8-year-old boy playing the violin, he remembered the boy he had been, vulnerable, hopeful, just wanting to be treated with dignity. Mr. Daniel, the child asked, is it true that you started out poor like us? Daniel knelt down to be at the child's eye level, just as he had wished Marcus had done years ago. It's true, and you know what I learned? It doesn't matter where you start, but the greatness you carry inside you. The boy smiled and spontaneously gave Daniel a hug. At that moment, the cycle was complete. The hug that had been denied to one vulnerable child was now freely given to another, planting seeds of hope instead of bitterness. Marcus Wellington had tried to teach Daniel that some people know their place in society. Instead, he taught him that every person has the power to create his own place in the world, especially when the place is built on compassion, justice, and shared opportunities. The little boy who once asked only for a hug had grown up to embrace the entire world through his foundation, proving that true strength does not come from stepping on others, but from lifting everyone up to your own level of greatness. The best revenge wasn't destroying Marcus Wellington. It was building a legacy so powerful that it rendered all the cruelty he stood for irrelevant. And maybe in the end that was the greatest lesson of all. Some battles are won not by destroying the enemy but by completely transcending the need for enemies. If this story about how a simple request for affection turned into a revolution of hope touched your heart, subscribe to Black Voices channel. Because sometimes when the world tries to teach us that we don't deserve love, the most powerful response is to build a world where all children receive the hug they deserve. And you can be part of that transformation.